Well, guess what, Jody? If he's there, his two tight ends are better than the receivers outside of Devontae Smith. And this guy has bent over backwards, as we've talked about constantly, to talk about competition. So how do you not put Zach Ertz on the field? And he doesn't want to do that. So you're putting a rookie head coach who wants to do something else in a more difficult position. I think the Eagles have done that too much. I don't want to overstate it. It's not that big of a deal because you should put the best players on the field. But that's not how he wants to play. That's not what he wants to do.
Time out, Philadelphia. $65. Sometimes do you know what works out? And over the last 24 hours, it has for the Birds 365 show because we were able to land two really good guests. One of which is a local guy, one of which is a national guy, both of which will be jumping aboard with us to talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. And the countdown continues. John McMullen, how many days till you get grass time?
It's too close, Jody. I'm starting to panic. It's getting a little too real for me. We are on Thursday. It's a Wednesday. It's grass time. So it's way too close, man. It is way too close.
I know you're looking forward to it to get a fist bump from Coach Sirianni and/or
any other player. He's going to be too busy now. I don't think he can do that.
Oh, you think that's off, huh? He's not going to be doing the glad hand.
You know what? I think there's going to be too many people now. Remember, in the offseason, it was very limited. I think there's going to be too much people. I think he's got to concentrate. I'm not expecting fist bumps, and I'm not going to be one of those people that's, Nick Sirianni
didn't fist bump me. Yeah. See what I can write about him tomorrow.
He's got work to do. I have no problem with it.
All right. Speaking of that work, one of the guests we're going to have on is Howard Eskin, who yesterday came out with a big report, first one to have it, and no one is refuting what Howard is reporting, that Zach Ertz not only is going to be at camp when camp opens for the Philadelphia Eagles, but he has been in the facilities the last couple of weeks working out with other Eagle players. Apparently the animus that was in place between he and the Eagles, they'd reached an accord on it or been able to put it behind them, but it seems like all systems go for Zach Ertz to join the Philadelphia Eagles when camp opens and possibly when the season gets underway, which means a lot of 12 personnel for the Birds again this year.
I'm glad you said that, Jody, because this brings up a lot of complications for Nick Sirianni. So I do want to get into that. We'll get into that throughout the show. But, you mentioned Howard's report. The second part is the more important. We know he's going to show up because of the CBA and the $40,000 fines that can't be forgiven. So we've been talking about that. He can't not show up. You got to come up with some plan. Now, Andrew Brand has made some inventive ways. Maybe they have him in the building, not on the practice field. So the more important part of Howard's report was the second part, the fact that he's already been there working out with his teammates. Now, you made that leap, and maybe it's true. Maybe it's true that the animus isn't there anymore. Remember, the coaches, and they have nothing to do with it anyway, but also people like Howie Roseman, they can't have any contact. The players can go in, they could use the facility, they can work out. They can't have any football time, so to speak, with the coaches, the GM, the personnel people. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's fractured. It does mean that perhaps Zach Ertz sees the writing on the wall and sees Howie Roseman's playing chicken, as we've said. He might still be playing that game of chicken. He might want this out there so other teams say, the Eagles aren't just going to wait and release and we can pick up Zach. There might be ulterior motives to this whole situation with Zach Ertz. And from my standpoint, look, it's been pretty clear the Eagles probably Zach definitely wanted to move on from the Eagles. The Eagles could certainly use the salary cap space they could get from moving Zach Ertz along in the short term. They need a cornerback that we constantly talk about. They still have to sign Landon Dickerson as Jody McDonald prepares to get ready and stretches the hamstrings for that victory lap. They still have some work to do on the financial front. So this doesn't mean he's going to be here week 1. It does mean he's going to be here on Tuesday. And that complicates matters, as I mentioned, for Nick Sirianni on a number of fronts. I don't think it's that big of a deal. Look, yes, the first day or two, people will be asking about Zach and the plans and that, and then it'll slow down. You'll get into the business of camp. But remember, this guy wants to play 11 personnel. He wants to put more speed on the field, which, by the way, Doug Peterson wanted to do as well, but he couldn't because his 2 tight ends were better than his receivers. Well, guess what, Jody? If he's there, his 2 tight ends are better than the receivers outside of Devontae Smith. And this guy has bent over backwards, as we've talked about constantly, to talk about competition. So how do you not put Zach Ertz on the field? And he doesn't want to do that. So you're putting a rookie head coach who wants to do something else in a more difficult position. I think the Eagles have done that too much. I don't want to overstate it. It's not that big of a deal because you should put the best players on the field. But that's not how he wants to play. That's not what he wants to do.
Time out, Philadelphia. Which press gathering, which media session were you in that I missed where he said, I don't want to play 12 position, 12.
Well, this is where you either believe the reporter or you don't believe the reporter. I'm not the only one, but I'm one of the guys who reported they told Zach that if he is here and he does come back, he's no longer the number 1 tight end. He was already told Dallas Goedert is going to be the guy. He was also told we're not going to play as much 12. So you're talking about, and I don't believe the numbers. Some other people have said 35% of the snaps. I don't believe Nick Sirianni would be that stringent and say, you're going to play 35% of the snaps. However, I do believe it was made clear to him that he's not going to be the number 1 tight end. He's not going to play as much as he's used to. And that's because they want, and by the way, they're right, Jody. They're completely right. They want more speed on the field. That's how you're successful in the NFL. They don't want to play all that 12 personnel. And as I pointed out, Doug Peterson didn't want to play all that 12 personnel either. He felt he had to because his receivers stink. Well, other than Devontae Smith, who I think is going to be a really good player, and I acknowledge he's unproven and maybe I'm skipping steps, but I know you're on my side there at least. Other than Devontae Smith, guess what? Everybody else might still stink. Now, hopefully they don't. Hopefully they develop, but there's nothing there that's proven. And there's nothing there that says, oh, this might be really good, and certainly not better than Zach Ertz, who is a proven, you can make an argument if he has a few more big years, borderline Hall of Fame tight end. Guess what? Quez Watkins ain't going to be that. John Hightower ain't going to be that. Greg Ward, with all due respect, ain't going to be that. Travis Fulgham ain't going to be that. So if you're Nick Sirianni, and forget about blowhards like me, Jody, because it doesn't matter. People like me don't matter. But you talk about competition in that locker room, and those guys know Zach Ertz is better, but he's not playing. I think that creates issues.
Right. But here's where I'll take the coach dead at his word, not weigh on what a reporter like yourself or anybody else says. I'll take the word of the coach when he looked into the camera and said it. And even as this, I'll call him a liar. At this, I'll call him a liar. I don't believe every position is open for competition. Fletcher Cox is not competing for snap reps, okay? He's going to play when he's going to play. But I do believe there's a competition for receiver snaps. That Zach Ertz, if he goes out and performs and plays better and makes plays, is going to play. They're not going to just continue to put Quez Watkins or John Hightower out there because they want to get faster. No, they want to move the football down the field. They want to get first downs. They want to get touchdowns. And I believe this is where, when the coach says it's about competition, he's telling the truth and he will act accordingly he will put the guys on the field that give him the best chance to move the ball down the field. Speed or position be damned. Just give me a guy who can make plays down the field. And if that's Zach Ertz, rather than Quez Watkins or J.J. Arcega-Whiteside or John Hightower or Jalen Reagor or anybody, he's going to put 2 tight ends out there. And, oh, by the way, if Zach Ertz comes in and Zach Ertz is killing it and Dallas Goedert is having issues and or is injured, Zach Ertz could go back to being the number 1 tight end on this team like that. As long as he's here, they attempt to trade him, nothing works out, they're going to play the best football player. And I don't think Dallas Goedert has done enough in his career that they say, well, Zach, sorry, we've decided, even though you're making more plays, you had 8 catches last week and Dallas had 2. Yes, this week we're still going to have Dallas on the field for 75% of the snaps. We're only going to have you on the field for 35% of the snaps. I don't think that the coach is going to do that. I think he's going to play the guy who's making plays for him.
I will say this, Jody. I think you're being very 2021 centric here. And I don't think it's about 2021 for the Philadelphia Eagles. And that comes straight from the owner on the record when he says transition year. From their philosophy, and again, you can say, okay, I don't believe McMullen. When you have 6 or 7 different reporters reporting the same thing, and I'm telling you, I'm looking you straight in the eye. I didn't talk to anybody else, and they all have the same information as me. Well, that tells me that's pretty solid information. And he was told he was not going to be the number 1 tight end. And by the way, that's one of the reasons he didn't want to be back. Let me just interrupt for a second. I believe you and everybody else who's reported that says today, as we say it, before camp ever opens up, Dallas Goedert is the number 1 tight end. Oh, I believe that. I'm saying if the season starts, practices gets underway. I won't even go injuries. I'll say both of them are healthy. If Zach Ertz is making more plays and doing more things on the field when given the chance with less snaps to start, they will not be adverse to flipping the roles of the 1 and the 2 tight end. That Zach Ertz could absolutely reclaim his spot as the number 1 tight end. I'll believe you when you report that the plan is for Goedert to be number 1. I understand why the plan would be for Goedert to be number 1, younger, a guy they want to sign to a contract. I understand all that football philosophy. But once they're both in camp, once the season starts, I believe that Nick Sirianni will lean toward the guy who's playing better. Let what was said during the offseason to members of the media, esteemed members of the media like John McMullen, be damned. Let what happens on the field dictate who plays, how many plays. Well, I will say this. To me, it doesn't even matter, Ertz versus Goedert, because they're both going to play, because they're both better than all the secondary receivers if it's really about competition. So we'll see. We'll have that answer if Zach Ertz is here. I truly believe that, because there's no way in the world that third receiver, whoever you want to throw out there at me, whether it's Fulgham or Ward or Watkins, there's no way they're going to be better than Zach Ertz, even coming off a bad year, even the fact that he's over 30. There's just no way. They're not in the same league. So we're going to see. We're going to see. And by the way, Howie Roseman factors into this as well, because guess what? He's got a lot of power. He might tell Nick Sirianni what he has to do and who he has to play, because he's going to tell him what the game day roster is. I can tell you that. He might decree it. And that decree, by the way, might come from Jeffrey Lurie. However, we're talking about a transition year. So this is similar to Aaron Rodgers at a much lower level in Green Bay. You know, the assumption coming out of Green Bay by a lot of people now is, let's get through this season, then we'll trade you, Aaron, sort of a lame duck situation. We'll see if that works out. Zach Ertz isn't going to be here next year. They're not going to work out an extension and pay 2 tight ends like the Patriots when they don't want to play 12 personnel. He's not going to be here next year.
But as my
scenario, he plays out this year.
As my esteemed colleague John McMullen tells me often, the Eagles like to try and serve two masters.
They do.
Yes, Jeff Lurie did come out and say this is a transition year on the day that they gave Doug Peterson his walking papers. Although he didn't really deserve to be fired, he was fired. On that day, that's when Jeff Lurie called it a transition year. Yet they signed Ryan Kerrigan this offseason. And they've got Josh Sweat, who's in a contract year and to become a free agent at the end of the year. You'd think they'd want to get him as many snaps as possible so they can evaluate how much they want to extend him, despite the fact that they have Derek Barnett, who's in a contract year, who this year is the fourth highest paid player on the Eagles. Fifth-year option on a rookie contract goes through the roof. He is the fourth highest paid player. I'd argue he's not close to being the fourth best player on the Philadelphia Eagles, but he's the fourth highest paid player on the Philadelphia. So you would think that they would want to get as many snaps into him to evaluate whether they want to keep him going forward. Yet they signed Ryan Kerrigan. Why? Because they want to win football games this year. Because they don't want to be 4-11-1 again. And that's what I'm telling you will factor in on the Zach Ertz signing, that even if the future says it's better to have Dallas Goedert out there 98% of the snaps, even though it's better to see what Quez Watkins and the like are at wide receiver. If Zach Ertz is helping them win football games and making plays for them the first couple of weeks of the season, he will play that much more going forward.
Well, I brought up Kerrigan, as you mentioned, Jody, but that's really cost effective. I would say if you look forward, and this will be, if Zach is here, as I said, this will be his last year in Philadelphia because they're not going to pay two tight ends. It's as simple as that. They're not going to pay top of the line money. And you could say, well, maybe if he doesn't have a big year, you can have a Kerrigan-like deal. And guess what? If he gets a Kerrigan-like deal, you don't want him anyway, most likely, because that means he's had a bad season, a really bad season. So I think the contracts kind of washed that argument away, Jody. But look, I just think it complicates things even further for a rookie head coach. That's my only issue. Zach is better than any third receiver you can potentially have on this team, and he wants more speed on the field. Is that the right move? You can argue that, but that's what he wants to do. And as I said, that's what Doug Peterson wanted to do as well. He couldn't because his two tight ends were better than his awful receivers. Bottom line.
Well, we've given you our opinions on Mr. Ertz and the fact that it seems like he's staying at least for a period of time. Coming up next, the guy who's going to join us is the guy who advanced the conversation on Zach Ertz. Broke the story yesterday. Zach has been in the facilities working out with the Birds, so it looks like he's coming back. At least for the opening of camp, we'll find out how long. We'll get the opinion of the Eagles sideline report on their radio network and host on WIP. Howard Eskin going to join us next here on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.